Hey everybody, it's Leslie Dale and Ellis Smith. I'm introducing you for everyone.
Hi.
For the TFP, there's a really hard news story going on today, and a lot of people are having a hard time making sense of it. Our reporter, Zach Peterson, is in court right now. We told you about this alleged terrorist from Signal Mountain, Robert Doggart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a few things the FBI says this man has done. Recruit people from right-wing social media sites, openly discuss using assault rifles on Muslims, and wanted to use explosives to burn down a mosque. So you hear all that from the FBI.
He basically wanted to blow up this town called Islamburg that
Right.
he had located in
outside of New York. Yeah. And yet prosecutors here don't call him a terrorist.
So why, right?
Right.
So, and a lot of people have been saying, well, why don't we call him a terrorist? Why don't we make that determination? And just real briefly, before we get into why he hasn't been charged with any terrorism or anything like that, what we do is we don't label people as terrorists. We let the authorities do that, and we report on what the authorities do, whether they be federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, the FBI, whatever. And we went through the same thing with the July 16th shooter. The guy, he crashed his car through the gates, began indiscriminately shooting U.S. service members, and people said, why can't you call that a terrorist act? I mean, it wasn't designed, it wasn't doing it out of love, and we had this kind of same discussion then, so we'll get back to that. But what attorneys say is that the federal government, in this case, the federal government who's charging him doesn't have a powerful sort of catch-all law where they can say you've done terrorism.
Domestic terrorism.
Yeah, for domestic terrorism, right. The way they normally get people on terrorism-related charges is if they communicated with ISIS people overseas, or maybe they were planning it out on a message board that's hosted in Pakistan by Al-Qaeda or something like that. And so when they can prove that outside connection, then it's very easy for them to call it terrorism. But where it gets dicey is with domestic terrorism that's done here, where it's just, apparently one guy who had all these plans, and it's not clear what his aims were. So that's the problem. They had the same problem with Dylan Roof. You remember he was the guy who shot up that church in South Carolina. Wanted to start a race war, he said.
He killed 9 black churchgoers in 2015.
And so people were saying, isn't this terrorism? And posting his face on social media and saying, this is the face of a terrorist. Well,
it's a hard question, because a lot of you are posing that same question. Then what is terrorism? And are these people not being charged appropriately, or are they not going to receive sentences that they should? And we're trying to dig into it here. An attorney explained, like you said, quote, essentially your charge is connected to something overseas if they're going to label it terrorism. But then the question is, why? Our reporter Zach Peterson went on to explain, acts of domestic terrorism must attempt to coerce people, intimidate government through mass destruction, and occur within the jurisdiction of the United States. Since September 11th, white supremacists and other non-Muslim fanatics have killed nearly twice as many people in the United States as radical Muslims, according to a 2015 count by a Washington-based research center in New America.
So, long story short is the way the laws are written in this country, and we're, as a newspaper that reports on the facts, we have to follow those same laws. The way they're written is the word terrorism is primarily, as it's defined by law, is primarily aimed at people or acts originating from outside the country. And this nation has always struggled what to do with so-called domestic terrorists. Now, there are some exceptions to that, of course. Zach did a really good job here with the context. He talks about Timothy McVeigh, who you remember was the Oklahoma City bomber. He killed hundreds of people, or actually he killed 168 people. He injured more than 500. And he had 2 charges that fell under the terrorism banner. Conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction against persons in the United States and against federal property, and the use of a weapon of mass destruction. Now, he was executed in June 2001, but you can see he actually did the thing that he intended to do, right? The bomb went off and people were killed. It was a huge tragedy for Oklahoma City. Doggart was stopped. I mean, he basically, and we've talked about this previously, but
we're surprised this story hasn't gained more national
Yeah.
attention, but it's because nothing happened.
yeah, he was
thankfully.
stopped. I guess they say he was intending to do this, and he was stopped because basically all the people he was recruiting were FBI informants who were recording all the conversations, which they played in court. And that's where Zach is right now, is he's in court. So it's really a question of, it sounds to me from reading this and looking at some of the context, you have a question of what is the intent, right? Is the intent to sow terror or attack the government, which in this case it wasn't. Timothy McVeigh attacked a federal building. You know, his intent was to target the government. And in Doggart's case, he was no less heinous in his intent, but he was going to wipe out a community and basically attack a mosque, a religious building, and then having a domestic component to it, not being influenced by anybody overseas or anything like that. They're always looking for that, what's that international component? So was he influenced by whoever overseas? And Muslims have said that unfairly targets them. So they acknowledge these facts that we're kind of laying out for you here, but they say that kind of paints them into in a bad light, because you have, every time there's a act of terror that has an Islamic component to it, we were always having this overseas influence. Maybe they were radicalized, and we even went through this with the July 16th shooter. Was he radicalized during a trip to Jordan? Or did he frequent message boards, or did he watch YouTube videos that were put out by this cleric or that radical cleric or whatever?
And they're still referring to it as an act of terror.
Yeah, they still never did actually fully say that was terrorism. Yeah, they called it an act of terror, and so we used the terminology in that case that the FBI used, which was act of terror. So
what's going on in court today?
Well, they're wrapping up the case today, so we should see the arguments kind of draw to a close, and now I'm not clear. I believe it might be prosecutors that are wrapping up their case, and then the defense will still get to talk. What you need to do is follow Zach Peterson on Twitter. He's giving the moment-to-moment updates on the case, and is really doing a good job of making sure. Now they don't allow, I think they don't allow a lot of electronics in the courtroom, so he's doing the best he can. But he's got everything up to the minute there on his Twitter account, and we've got that online as well. But it's a tough spot, because as a newspaper you don't want to make determinations that really a court needs to make. And we looked it up in the AP Style book, which is the Associated Press, and what they recommend is, this is what all news organizations adhere to, is that we don't label someone. I can't call Leslie a terrorist unless she's convicted of a terrorism-related charge. And so that's why you'll see us say he was a man who planned to blow up a mosque, because that's what facts are coming out to that extent. But you won't see us say terrorism or terrorist, because the prosecutors aren't calling him that, the investigating authorities aren't calling him that. So it would just be us calling him that.
And the attorneys who Zach spoke with, who think that he does potentially fall into these guidelines, are working to move toward passing more definitive definitions of domestic terrorism. So,
because you're seeing this,
to
put it in bigger context, in Europe a lot of times, and they're starting to see a lot more kind of quote-unquote homegrown terrorism. So it used to be all your terrorists were from Libya and Iran and Saudi Arabia, but because of kind of the changing society, I guess, you're seeing a lot more people that are
social media.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more people that are radicalized at home that are from your country. So while terrorism always used to be, traditionally, it was this thing where other people came to attack us. But even with, as we noted, July 16th, and what you're seeing in Europe, and what we've seen here in this country, we're seeing more people who are radicalized right here at home. And so the law hasn't kept pace with that. And that's one of the things that this group is saying. A charge geared specifically for domestic terrorists could address what these groups call a double standard that negatively affects Muslims. And this group is planning to lobby Congress for such a change. And it's just something. Now, I don't know that they're concerned as Muslims that they're getting the short end of the stick because a lot of the attacks that originate outside the United States that end up getting called terrorism are done by Muslims, whereas a lot of the ones that happen inside the United States aren't. But I think you'd see the effect spread pretty evenly, especially with, as we noted, the July 16th thing that we struggled with. What to call that might have fallen under the statute too, and of course he was Islamic, so I don't know that it would just be for Muslims. It would just kind of make a level playing field. If you're doing an act that's designed to sow terror, whether you're from Canada or Saudi Arabia or the United States or Signal Mountain, it would be the same charge for everybody. So that's something that people are aware of, but it's kind of weird. In the meantime, you're seeing these headlines, and a lot of you have reacted on Twitter and on Facebook, and you have questions about this. And it is kind of weird that somebody can plan to blow a bunch of stuff up, kill a bunch of people, and nobody calls it terrorism. Like, what's going on? And it's just the law, though. That's the law has not kept pace with changing developments in our society.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers that. I don't know.
Well, I think everyone's trying to figure it out. People involved in the case, and people at home, and reporters, and we'll see if something moves forward with this definition. And I'm interested to see an update from Zach.
Yeah.
And what kind of sentencing Robert Doggart could face.
Well, he originally, I think they were trying to say that he wasn't fit to stand trial, and a judge said that he was. So he may still try to claim that he's not right or something like that. But let's, if you don't mind, let's go to the comments.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
So Dustin Crawley said he's not been radicalized. He's trying to kill the radicals, ones that hate us and want to kill us and fly planes into our building. So I think what Dustin's saying is he had identified, or he thought that this was a very radical group, and he was trying to, I guess, preemptively attack them before they attacked us. And I'm not sure that that's completely correct.
Well, like we mentioned, according to the FBI person who tracked this guy down online, he said he recruited people from right-wing social media sites. So that, in the FBI's terminology, would be considered being radicalized.
Yes.
Openly, yeah. See,
it gets dicey because they were here in the United States, right? He wasn't going to the ISIS sites. He was going to militia sites and things like that.
You're right. So. Openly discussed using assault rifles on Muslims.
Yeah.
And wanted to blow up a mosque. So that is according to the FBI in response to that comment. That's what we factually know from those investigators.
Yeah, we haven't seen evidence that the people he was targeting were actually planning terrorism of their own, which I think is true. I'm not saying that that evidence doesn't exist. We just haven't seen that. It hasn't been presented as near as we can tell. Stephen Crow says, never see a Christian killing people in the name of Jesus, huh? And then he goes on to talk about Muslims are killing people. The facts are, as we noted, that more people are actually killed by. I mean, you're frankly more likely to get struck by lightning in this country than you are to be killed in a terrorist attack. But even so, more of those terrorist attacks are actually, or we can't call them terrorist attacks, but more of those attacks that seem designed to sow terror are done by people who aren't Muslims.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this man, too.
Yeah.
He's a former engineer at TVA, a 2014 congressional candidate, and never launched this plan of attack because authorities that we mentioned tracked him down online and stepped in and arrested him in April of 2015. So what does he face? One count of solicitation to commit arson of a building, one count to commit a civil rights violation, and 2 counts of threat in interstate commerce. So I'm wondering, since we're not in court, and we'll hear from Zach Reporter, the sentencing for this compared to domestic terrorism, I'm thinking, is a lot less.
Well, again, arson, that's like somebody set a building on fire, right? And some of these, the civil rights violation, that's how they, of course, got people during the 60s and 70s who were murdering people. And then the threat in interstate commerce. These are, each of these are not huge like life in prison type charges. Maybe when taken together, he's getting up there in years. I don't know how old he is, but I want to say 60s or 70s. But it could be effectively a life sentence for him when you add up if he's found guilty. But these are not like super duper heavy like murder. Again, this was he didn't actually follow through. These were these were his plans. It's hard to know. We don't have a crystal ball, so we have no idea whether he would have been successful or not. But I think by definition, since they caught him before it happened, you're not going to see the charges be as severe than if he actually followed through and did the attack. Woody Batlaran said, "Americans are driven by irrational fears. It's our biggest export." I think speaking mainly to the fear that you'll be killed in a terrorist attack or something, which we noted statistically, and this isn't me saying this. This is there's a lot of facts to back this up. The chances of being killed in a terrorist attack are very low. So that's I think that's what you're representing there. Dustin Crawley, we've already got a comment from you, but you're saying not saying what he did was right by no means. He should have left it to the military. But I do fear if we keep letting these people into our country by the hundreds, we may all have to stand against them one day. And I think that's a sentiment, whether right or wrong or fact-based or fear-based or whatever it is. I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people have these days, which is that they look to Europe. I don't want to delegitimize what you're saying, because you look to Europe and you have seemingly these incidents happening, in Turkey, in Paris, where there's these horrific terrorist attacks that maybe put some of ours to shame. And people are sort of operating with impunity, and you look at the immigration there, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking at and saying, we don't want to. It's not maybe happening currently in our country, but we don't want it to happen. So I think that's where you're coming from there, and so I don't want to delegitimize what you're saying, because certainly a lot of people feel that way. All right. So Ryan Thomason, he says he's a terrorist and should be found guilty. My money, if I were to make a bet, is that he will be found guilty. I mean, they've got him dead to rights with phone recordings, meetings in restaurants with people basically saying, "I want to blow up this town."
He has other cases pending too. There's attorneys that are filing a civil suit for the mosque against him, and they say that you mentioned having these conversations in restaurants. He was talking to 3 people at City Cafe and was very concerned about their own safety after the alleged attack, saying, and we have these recordings Zach does, if we make it out and actually escape, what does that do to all of us? So he was saying that, and also you just don't go in and kill people and blow stuff up and then the next day, go back to work and be real happy about that. So these attorneys are just showing what kind of mental
sort of
place
mindset
he was
and the
in,
plans.
sitting over at City Cafe talking to people. It's pretty frightening.
Yeah, and that's
going on.
But that's, again, it just speaks to the difficulty these attorneys are trying to. I mean, look, the guy was planning to do a thing that I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't have wanted to happen, which is whether you're on the right or the left, you probably don't want a bunch of people to be senselessly murdered and blown up. I think the struggle here is how do you label it with the laws that we've got, which are inadequate. I think everybody agrees, which are inadequate to the task of really properly categorizing this crime. And I want to quote Claudia Gutz here, who's also G-U-T-Z. Sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. She says, very good points and great reporting. Thanks. Mostly those come from Leslie, all the good stuff. Though media and readers seem quick to forget this standard and attribute terrorist labels to people suspected of designing, implementing acts of terror when the suspect is not white, an extremist. Journalists should maintain this caliber of reporting and apply the same standard you discussed to every story. And that's what we try to do, is we try to have standards, which is what makes this hard, because the law is our standard in this case, and the law is inconsistent.
The law is inconsistent.
Yeah, so you're trying to explain, like, our standard is...
Even as reporters, this is complicated.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking for a few minutes about this now, and I feel like I'm barely closer to being able to explain it clearly than we were at the beginning, but that is our struggle, and we don't want to be in the position where we're deciding, okay, Leslie's a terrorist, but Ellis isn't. I mean, we don't want to be in that position where we're making those value judgments. We just want to report what the news is.
We're about peace.
Yeah, we just want to report what the facts are, and then how do you define how do you define that fact? And so in this case, the label terrorist is defined legally. It's defined by prosecutors, and it's defined in the court system. And so that's the definition we use. Now, I think that based on a lot of the discussion that's happening now around this and around the Dylan Roof case, I think you're going to see the law start to catch up, and I think you're going to see...
well, people are definitely pushing for it.
Yeah, you're going to see over time, I think you're going to see the laws for domestic acts of terror catch up to the laws that we use for foreign acts of terror, so that there's sort of a level playing field there, whether you're from Saudi Daisy or Saudi Arabia, you get the same charges. So I think we can look forward to that and not having to have these complicated
discussions. So people
discussions.
are lobbying for this.
Yeah.
So we're going to follow that, and we will have all the updates from our reporter, Zach Peterson, and he wrote 2 really good stories about this very complicated matter. So good job, Zach.
Clear as mud.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, let's have a better day tomorrow.
All right, tomorrow we will. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day, and what do we have to look forward to?
Peace and love.
Peace and love. That's right. At least for one day before we get back to the
we're
killing
actually
and violence.
No, we're supposed to be going to an anti-violence dance party of all
For
things
Valentine's
at
Day.
Bessie Smith.
Nothing to do with this. It just happened to be on the calendar.
Right. No. So we're moving forward to anti-violence tomorrow. We might go taste some chocolate.
Taste some chocolate. Maybe make some chocolate.
And
one of your favorite Valentine's Day foods.
Potentially talk about first kisses. So that is much different than this horrible, complicated story.
And coming up on Wednesday, we head over to the UTC Fine Arts Center for a really neat performance that I don't want to give too much away.
No,
but it's going to be live. There's going to be some very talented musicians, and we'll be doing that at noon on Wednesday. So check in with us then on Facebook for a little bit of a feel-good broadcast.
Yay! We all need it. Yeah. Okay. Bye, you guys.